They called it a gift, but it was a curse that bled through the soul. When Malin dreamed, worlds burned. When he woke, the Emperor's hunters were already on their way. The screaming started before dawn. Malin woke with blood in his mouth, his lungs clawing for air as the taste of iron and ash lingered on his tongue. The room stank of ozone and something burnt, like parchment caught in holy flame. The cot beneath him was soaked through with sweat. He blinked once, twice, and saw the faint trails of light still hanging in the air, twisting like smoke, like the remnants of a vision not yet gone. He had seen it again, the city of glass collapsing in silence, millions crying out but never making a sound. He could feel their terror echoing in the walls of his skull. It was always the same burning sky. He sat up, clutching his chest, and whispered a prayer that felt useless even as it left his lips. The dormitory lights flickered to life, humming with the same sickly rhythm as his heart. Around him, the other laborers stirred, none daring to look in his direction. They all knew. They'd seen his fits before, heard his cries in the night. And though none had spoken it aloud, he could feel their thoughts pressing against him like knives. Psyker. The word carried the same weight as taint. Another nightmare, Voss. The overseer's voice cut through the air. Malin turned, breath still uneven. Overseer Creel stood in the doorway, arms folded, servoskull hovering at his shoulder, its red eye blinking. You're late for shift again. I don't care what haunts your dreams. Get to the lines before I have the arbitrators drag you there. Malin nodded, forcing himself to stand. The floor beneath his bare feet felt alive, humming faintly, like it too remembered what he had seen. He threw on his coveralls, the fabric stiff and caked with dust, and stepped into the corridor. The hab complex stretched endlessly, lit by flickering lumen strips that gave everything the color of rust. The air was thick with the smell of promethium and decay. Somewhere above, the great hives of Terra's lower manufactorums rumbled like the stomach of a dying god. He tried to focus on the rhythm of his steps to drown out the whispers that always followed his dreams. They were quieter today, but still there, murmuring behind the walls of his mind, voices too ancient to belong to men. Once, as a child, he had tried to answer them. The punishment had been swift. His mother had washed his mouth with holy oils until he vomited blood, whispering prayers as she wept. Never speak to the dark, Malin. Never listen. But he always did. He couldn't help it. By the time he reached the refinery floor, his hands were trembling again. The machines loomed above like cathedral organs, spilling steam and fire in unending rhythm. Men and women moved like ants among them, their faces hidden by soot-streaked respirators. He took his position at the conveyor, pretending not to see the way others stepped subtly away from him, as if distance alone could protect them from damnation. "Emperor preserve us," muttered Jorah, the worker beside him, making the sign of the Aquila when their eyes met. "He's the one who made the power surge last week. I heard he burned through half the grid with his mind." "It was a relay fault," Malin said quietly, but Jorah was already turning away. He tried to focus on the work, the mechanical rhythm of sorting the mineral shards as they came down the line, but the hum returned, faint at first, then stronger. It wasn't the machines this time. It was inside him, the same vibration that had filled his skull before every vision, before every loss of control. He clenched his fists, biting his tongue until the copper taste flooded his mouth. Not now, not here. And then it came, the flash. His eyes rolled back, his body locked in place as the world around him melted into something vast and terrible. He saw a black sun rising above a sea of screaming faces. He saw ships the size of continents drifting through storms of fire. He saw himself, tiny, insignificant, standing before a throne of gold that bled light and sorrow. The voices screamed louder, pleading, laughing, demanding. When his vision cleared, he was on the ground. Smoke filled the air. The machinery had gone silent, the great belts frozen in place. Workers shouted, some screaming, others praying. Creel was there, barking orders, pointing at him. The servoskull hovered closer, its red eye glaring like a lens of judgment. "He's touched," someone shouted. "He's cursed." Creel's hand went to the comm unit at his belt. "Contact the Ordo. We've got a Psyker breach." Malin scrambled to his feet, mind racing. He could already hear the approaching wail of Arbite's sirens. The air was heavy, shimmering. The taste of ozone was back. He didn't know if it was the machines or him. He ran. The corridors blurred as he sprinted through them, lungs burning. Behind him came the pounding of boots, the bark of orders, the hiss of charging shock mauls. He didn't look back. Every lumen strip he passed flickered violently, bursting in showers of sparks as his panic surged. He turned corners blindly, descended rusted stairways, until the sounds of pursuit faded beneath the steady, unrelenting hum of the hive's heart. He stumbled into one of the lower tunnels, unused, half-collapsed, the air damp and cold. The smell of rot and oil filled his nostrils. He dropped to his knees, chest heaving. For a moment the silence felt unbearable. Then he realized it wasn't silence at all. It was breathing someone else's. "Don't be afraid," a voice said from the dark. Malin turned sharply, eyes straining. A figure emerged from the shadows, draped in robes that shimmered faintly with hidden circuitry. The stranger's face was obscured by a hood, but the glint of augmetic implants marked them as no ordinary underhive preacher. "You'll only draw them faster if you run blind." "Who are you?" Malin demanded, voice trembling. "Someone who remembers what it is to be hunted," the stranger said. "They'll brand you, boy. Soul binder, null collar, the works. You'll burn bright for the Emperor until there's nothing left. Unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless you learn control." The word echoed in the tunnel like a forbidden hymn. Malin stared, unsure whether to believe or flee. "They'll find me," he said finally. "They will," the stranger agreed. "But perhaps by then you'll understand what you are." He reached into his robes and withdrew a small metal disc engraved with a sigil Malin didn't recognize, a single eye within a circle of flame. "When you see this mark again, don't run from it." Then the figure was gone, melting into the tunnels as silently as he had appeared. Malin sat there clutching the disc, the faint hum of it vibrating through his fingers like a pulse. The sirens were growing louder again, echoing through the corridors. He pressed his back against the cold wall, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the flickering lumen at the tunnel's mouth. He thought of the voices, the visions, the city of glass burning in his dreams. For the first time, he wondered if they were calling to him, or warning him. The Arbites came first, black-armored silhouettes moving like a wall of judgment through the lower corridors. They didn't need names or orders. Their purpose was as ancient as the Emperor's silence. Behind them came the faint crackle of power fields and the low, discordant hum that marked the presence of the Ordo Hereticus. Malin could feel it before he saw them, the way the air thickened, the way every lumen dimmed as though the shadows themselves were afraid. Witchfinders, the hammer of the Emperor made flesh. He had always known, somewhere deep within the marrow of his fear, that this day would come. He just hadn't expected it so soon or so loudly. From the shadows of the maintenance conduit where he hid, he could see their lights sweeping the tunnels below, pure white beams that turned rust and dust into mockery of daylight. Each footstep was measured, ritualistic. Each breath a prayer. The leader walked at their center, cloaked in black and crimson, purity seals fluttering like dead leaves from his armor. His voice carried even through the stone. "The Psykers' resonance was recorded in Sector 19 Gamma," he said, speaking to no one and everyone. "By decree of His Most Holy Inquisition, all anomalies are to be purged. The taint of the warp spreads faster than mercy." The servoskulls around him chattered in binaric tongues, their lenses sweeping. Malin pressed himself further into the shadows, forcing shallow breaths. He could hear the heartbeat of the metal beneath him, the pulse of terror itself. It matched his own, too loud, too desperate. He clutched the strange disc the hooded stranger had given him, the sigil's edges cutting faintly into his palm. It hummed again, almost like it was alive. Then the whisper came, not from the corridor, but from inside his skull. "They will burn you if you stay. It was a voice neither male nor female, but something in between, stretched thin by time and distance. The light they serve devours all shadows, even those cast by its own hand. Malin froze. His mouth went dry. He'd heard the voices before, but never like this. Never words that answered his fear. "Who are you?" he whispered under his breath. "The question is who you are, dreamer." The lights below flared, a burst of actinic brightness that blinded even through the gaps in the grating. Someone had found a trail, an echo of his power lingering in the dust perhaps. The witchfinder raised his hand, and from his palm extended a device shaped like a chalice, its rim lined with flickering blue runes. "The Emperor's gaze is infinite," he intoned. "By his sight no witch hides." The chalice pulsed once, and every lumen in the corridor died. Darkness swallowed the space hole, and in that darkness came a sound, soft, wet, and final. A scream cut short. When the lights returned, one of the arbites was gone. All that remained was a smear of blackened metal and the echo of a prayer cut in half. The witchfinder did not flinch. He simply adjusted his stance and whispered, "So it bleeds near." Malin knew he couldn't stay. He crawled backward through the conduit, each movement scraping his palms, each breath threatening to echo too loudly. He reached a junction where the tunnel split in three. The smell of ozone grew thicker, an omen. He chose the left path, guided more by instinct than reason. The hum of the hive deepened as he descended, the walls sweating condensation that shimmered faintly in the flickering light. He stumbled into a lower passage half flooded with runoff from the manufactoria above. The water was black and slick with oil. Pipes lined the ceiling like veins, and steam hissed from their joints in irregular bursts. Somewhere behind him, the voices of the hunters grew fainter, replaced by the omnipresent hum of the hive's mechanical heartbeat. He paused, catching his reflection in the oil-slick surface of the water. For a moment, it wasn't his face staring back. It was the face from his dreams, the burning city reflected in his eyes. "Why me?" he whispered. The reflection didn't answer, but the disc in his hand pulsed again, and the hum of the hive changed tone, like 1,000 unseen machines adjusting their pitch. Then he heard it, a human sound, soft but distinct. A woman's voice, whispering from the dark ahead. "Malin." He froze. No one knew his name here. The sound came again, closer, threaded with static like a half-caught transmission. "Malin Voss." He moved toward it, drawn forward as though on invisible strings. The corridor opened into a wider chamber filled with broken machinery. The air was warmer here, tinged with the smell of incense and blood. In the center stood a figure in white, illuminated by a single flickering lumen. Her face was hidden by a porcelain mask shaped like a mourning woman's visage. In her hands, she held a staff topped with an unlit candle. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice low but steady. "Neither should you," Malin replied, though his voice wavered. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "One who gathers the lost before the fire claims them. They call us the chorus." "The chorus?" Her gloved hand reached out and brushed the air near him, stopping just short of his chest. "You're louder than most. I heard your scream in the warp before the witchfinders did." He took a step back. "You're one of them, another Psyker." "Another? No, we are fragments, echoes. We survive by not being whole." The candle atop her staff flickered to life, though no flame touched it. "Come with me, Malin, before they reach this place. You can't outrun them alone." For a moment he hesitated. He thought of his mother, of the prayers she whispered while he convulsed as a child. He thought of the hooded man in the tunnels and his strange promise of control. And then he thought of the witchfinders, cold, relentless, their faith sharper than any blade. He followed her. The path twisted through forgotten corridors where the walls were carved with symbols older than any imperial creed. The candlelight danced across inscriptions that shifted when not directly looked at, words that might have been prayers or curses. Malin tried not to read them. The woman moved quickly, her white robes brushing the filth without staining. "They'll find you," he said again, almost to himself. They always do, she answered, but not before we find what's left of you. They emerged into a chamber unlike the rest. It was circular, lined with mirrors so ancient their surfaces had grown opaque. In the center stood a machine half buried in dust, its design both mechanical and organic. Tubes ran from it into the walls, and faint blue light pulsed within its heart. "What is this place?" he asked. "A sanctuary of sorts," she said. "Before the Crusades, before the heresy, there were many like it, places where voices like ours were studied, not silenced. The Emperor's dream was different then." Malin stepped closer to the machine. It resonated faintly when he approached, a low vibration that made the mirrors tremble. And now it's a tomb. She reached to touch the machine, but as her hand neared, the hum deepened, and suddenly Malin's vision fractured. The chamber was gone. In its place he saw a vast sea of souls swirling in torment, billions screaming as golden light poured through them, feeding a dying sun. At its center was a figure on a throne, its flesh sloughed away, its eyes twin voids of endless hunger. The vision burned through him, filling every nerve with agony. He collapsed, gasping, clutching his head. The woman's voice echoed through the storm of his thoughts. "You see it too, don't you? The beacon that eats the sky." "The astronomicon," he whispered, "the Emperor's light." Her laughter was soft, almost kind. "Light, yes, but all light casts shadow. The Psykers are the shadow it feeds upon." He looked up at her, the realization settling like ash in his lungs. "You mean we're the fuel?" "We always were," she said simply. Before he could answer, the hum of the hive changed again, this time sharper, urgent. The mirrors around them cracked simultaneously, as if struck by invisible hammers. The woman's candle extinguished itself. Malin felt the pressure in his skull spike, and a voice roared inside his head, "Found you." The witchfinders had located them. The woman grabbed his arm. "You can still leave. Take the lower passage behind the machine. It leads to the outer waste tunnels. Don't stop, don't look back." "What about you?" She smiled behind the mask, though he couldn't see it. "My role was to find you, to wake you. Go." He hesitated only a moment longer before the walls shook. Blue fire erupted from the cracks, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors above. He ran, clutching the disc in one hand, feeling it burn against his palm. The lower passage was narrow, filled with the stench of rot and metal. The ground vibrated with the rhythm of explosions somewhere behind him. He didn't look back. The tunnel stretched endlessly, until finally it opened into a chasm where the hive ended and the underworld began. The air here was colder, cleaner in a way that felt wrong. The only light came from the faint glow of his psychic aura, flickering uncontrollably with every heartbeat. He stumbled forward, half crawling, until exhaustion forced him to stop. He turned once, just enough to see the faint blue glow of the sanctum collapsing behind him, swallowed by fire and shadow. The echoes of screams carried faintly through the tunnels, hers among them, though he couldn't be sure. The disc pulsed once more, brighter than before, and for a brief instant he saw the same sigil appear on the far wall of the chasm. The eye in the circle of flame. Then the mark faded, leaving only stone and darkness. Malin sank to his knees, trembling. He was alive, but something inside him had changed. The visions no longer felt distant. They were bleeding into the waking world, whispering truths too heavy to bear. He looked at his hands, and for the first time, light moved beneath his skin. He wasn't sure if he was still running from the Inquisition, or toward something worse. The underhive stretched endlessly in every direction, a labyrinth of rusted corridors and dripping caverns where the discarded and the damned went to disappear. To the upper spires, it was nothing more than rot beneath the empire of light, but here, life persisted, crawling through the bones of dead machines and the ghosts of forgotten wars. Malin wandered through it like a man already half buried. Days or hours passed, time here didn't move, it merely lingered. The air shimmered with the residue of burnt ozone, the taste of old energy discharges lingering on the tongue. He found food when he could, nutrient blocks scavenged from derelict halves, stagnant water filtered through rags. Sleep came only in brief bursts, haunted by visions that bled through the veil. Sometimes he saw the woman in white again, her mask cracked, whispering things he could never remember upon waking. Other times he heard the screams of the Psykers, hundreds, maybe thousands, feeding a dying light across the stars. When the warp storms in his dreams calmed, the silence was worse. He had learned not to trust silence. On the fourth night, if it was night, he woke to the faint hum of machinery. It wasn't the steady pulse of the hive above, but something older, more deliberate. Faint voices echoed from the tunnels ahead, not speech exactly, but harmonic resonance, a low droning that rose and fell in waves. It vibrated in his chest, in his teeth. His first thought was fear. The witchfinders had found him again, their hymn of purgation rolling through the tunnels. But then the tone changed. It was imperial. It was mournful. Drawn by something deeper than curiosity, Malin followed the sound. The tunnels widened into a great chamber carved from the bedrock. Its walls were covered in sigils that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light. The air vibrated with the sound, a choral lamentation sung by voices that didn't belong entirely to this world. Dozens of figures stood in a rough circle, their robes tattered, their faces hidden behind masks of bone and glass. In the center of their formation hovered a massive crystalline construct, fractured in places, its inner facets glowing faintly blue. The sound came from within it, like trapped souls singing through the cracks. One of the masked figures turned toward him, their movements smooth and unhurried. The singing didn't stop, but the notes shifted slightly, as though acknowledging his presence. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said, voice strangely layered, one human tone beneath another that resonated inside his skull. Malin swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to intrude, I was running from." "The fire," the voice finished. "You carry its mark." He looked down at his hand. The disk he had clutched since the sanctum's fall now glowed faintly through his skin, as if it had melted into his flesh. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are what remains," the figure said. "The choir of the damned, those who saw the Emperor's light and understood what it truly was." The word struck him like a blow. "You're heretics," he said instinctively, though there was no conviction in it. "If truth is heresy, then yes." The figure gestured toward the crystal. This was once a psi-focus, used by the early Astra Telepathica to amplify the voices of those bound to the Astronomicon, before they learned how to chain souls properly. When it fractured, some of us were caught between its harmonics, not quite alive, not entirely within the warp. We have sung ever since. The light within the crystal flickered, revealing faint outlines, faces, maybe, or something like them, moving beneath the surface. The sound intensified, the harmonies rising to a pitch that made the stone vibrate. "What do you want from me?" Malin asked. "Nothing you were not already meant to give," the voice said. "The mark you carry links you to the same frequency. You were chosen long before you were born." "Chosen for what?" "To speak for those who can no longer scream." He took a step back, heart pounding. The light from the crystal reached for him, tendrils of blue energy licking across the air like heat shimmer. His thoughts blurred, replaced by images, a planet burning under twin suns, children screaming as their minds were ripped open, the golden light devouring everything it touched. "Stop," he gasped, clutching his head. "Make it stop." The figure stepped closer. "You must listen. The Emperor's beacon is dying. Every year it feeds on more of us. The choir is what remains of those who tried to resist. If you don't hear us now, there will be nothing left to warn the others." The crystal pulsed again, and suddenly he was inside it. The chamber vanished. In its place stretched a sea of stars connected by threads of light. Each thread trembled, flickering with faces, lives, entire histories compressed into moments. He saw Terra the throne, a skeletal figure bathed in gold and agony. Thousands of Psykers screaming as their essence was stripped away, their light funneled into the dying god's heart. Their deaths were not mercy, they were maintenance. Every beacon that guided the ships of mankind through the void was fueled by souls just like his. He saw beyond that, worlds devoured by silence where the astronomican's reach had faltered, fleets lost in the void, their prayers swallowed by endless dark. Then he saw something worse. In the heart of that darkness, something watched him. It wasn't the Emperor. It wasn't a demon either. It was older than both, vast and patient, its attention like a blade of thought that cut through galaxies. When it turned its gaze upon him, he screamed. He was falling, the vision shattered. The choir's song ceased abruptly, leaving only echoes. He was back in the chamber, gasping, his body shaking violently. The masked figure knelt beside him, a gloved hand pressing to his chest. "You saw it," the voice said softly. "What was it?" Malin rasped. "What did I see?" "The wound in reality itself," came the answer. "The warp hungers, but it is not alone. Something stirs beyond it, something that uses even gods as tools. The Emperor holds the gate closed with our lives, but each sacrifice weakens what remains of him." Malin's mind reeled. He wanted to deny it, to believe that the pain had made him hallucinate, but the truth burned too clearly behind his eyes. He had felt it. The Emperor's light, the thing every Imperial child was taught to worship, was both salvation and slaughter. "Why show me this?" he demanded. "What am I supposed to do with it?" The figure withdrew their hand. "You must survive long enough to be heard. They will come for you again, they always do, but you carry a voice louder than any weapon, and if you fall, the truth falls with you." He staggered to his feet. "Then help me, come with me." The figure tilted their head. "We cannot leave. The choir is bound. Our voices hold the fractures closed. If we stop singing, the warp will bleed through this place, and the hive above will drown in madness." Malin looked around the circle of silent figures. Some trembled as if struggling to remain upright, their bodies thin and brittle beneath their robes. "You're prisoners," he said. "No," the figure said. "We are sentinels. The Emperor forgot us, but the void did not." A sudden tremor shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. The choir's song faltered, discordant. Then came the sound he feared most, the whine of power fields igniting, distant but approaching. "They found you," he said. "They found you," the figure corrected. "Go. The lower tunnels will take you to the reactor shafts. Beyond that lies the surface waste fields. If you reach them, you may find passage off-world." Malin hesitated. "What about the others?" The figure looked up, toward the sound of descending boots. "Our part in the song is ending." Without another word, they turned back to the crystal and raised their arms. The choir resumed its song, louder than before, the harmonies deepening until the air itself began to shake. Light poured from the fractures, bathing the chamber in blue fire. Malin ran. He barely made it to the tunnel mouth before the explosion came, not of fire but of light. The energy rippled through the rock, disorienting his senses. For a moment, gravity vanished. He saw the chamber collapse inward, the figures consumed by radiance. The shockwave threw him into the tunnel wall, knocking the breath from his lungs. When he crawled to his feet again, there was only silence. He stumbled through the tunnels for hours, guided by instinct alone. Eventually, he reached the reactor shafts, towering caverns where ancient machinery churned endlessly, venting heat and smoke into the abyss. The air was unbreathable. His skin stung from radiation burns. Yet he pressed on, each step fueled by what he had seen. He climbed a broken ladder to a higher level, emerging into a passage that opened to the surface. The light that greeted him wasn't sunlight but the dim, perpetual twilight of a polluted sky. The wasteland stretched before him, mountains of debris, rivers of toxic sludge, and beyond that, the faint silhouette of a transport port. For the first time, he saw the stars faint, flickering through the smog. Somewhere among them, the astronomican burned, a beacon powered by agony. He fell to his knees and wept, not from sorrow alone, but from the unbearable knowledge that he was both victim and fuel in the same divine machine. He didn't notice the figure watching from the ridge above. A woman in tattered white robes, her mask cracked down the middle. When she spoke, her voice carried on the wind. "You made it out." Malin looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "You died in the sanctum." "Perhaps," she said, "but death is a flexible concept for those who have seen the warp." She stepped closer, and he saw that her flesh shimmered faintly, half solid, half energy. "The choir burned to protect you. You carry their echo now, every one of their voices." He could feel it, the hum under his skin, the vibration in his bones. "What do I do with it?" "Sing," she said simply, "or scream. The galaxy will hear you either way." Before he could respond, the sky flared. High above, streaks of light descended, drop pods. The Inquisition hadn't given up. The Witchfinders had traced his psychic trail to the wastes. The woman turned toward the horizon. "Run, Malin Voss. The Emperor listens only to those who burn." And then she was gone, her form dissolving into light. He ran again through the ash and wind, toward the only chance he had left. But behind him the sky opened in fire, and the hymn of the Witchfinders echoed through the wasteland, a song of purity, of righteous death. He didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. The wastes were endless. The ash rose in spirals that clung to his skin like ghosts, coating his lungs until every breath felt like swallowing dust. Malin Voss moved through it half-blind, guided by the dim light of a dying dawn. The winds howled against the metal bones of a fallen manufactorum, and every echo made him flinch. Behind him, the Inquisition's drop pods still burned where they had landed, the plumes of smoke clawing into the bruised sky like accusations. He had run until his legs gave way, then crawled until he could no longer tell whether he was moving towards salvation or into another grave. The first sign of life came as sound, chanting, faint but rising with the wind. He followed it over a ridge of slag until he saw them, a procession of robed figures carrying torches, their light flickering in the smog. At their center was a crude cart piled high with broken relics, twisted icons, and what looked like the half-charred remains of a man still clutching a rosarius. The crowd moved in rhythm, their voices low and fervent, singing a hymn he didn't recognize. At the head of the procession walked a tall woman in rust-red robes, her hair shaved on one side and braided on the other, her face marked with the scars of ritual burning. In her hand, she carried a staff crowned with a cracked aquila. Her eyes found him before he could hide. "Another soul drawn to the ashes," she said, her voice steady, too calm for a wasteland priest. "Come forward, traveler." He hesitated, exhaustion warring with fear. "If you know who I am, you should be running." "Running from what?" she asked. "From faith, from the fire that cleanses." "I'm hunted," he said, "by the Ordo Hereticus." "Then you're in good company." She gestured for him to join them. "We all are." The procession slowed as he approached. Dozens of eyes watched him, some filled with suspicion, others with hollow reverence. The smell of incense and burnt flesh hung heavy. When he reached her, the woman tilted her head slightly, studying him. "The warp hums in you," she murmured. "A song half sung, half choked. You are no ordinary rogue psyker. You don't know what I am." She smiled faintly. "Don't I? I am Sister Elenia, once of the Order of the Blazing Martyr. We were taught to burn the witch, to scour the mind's corruption with holy flame. But the Emperor showed me a different truth. Fire doesn't only destroy, it transforms." He looked past her to the cart. The corpse on it twitched faintly, the skin crackling. "You burn the dead." "We burn the lies that bind them," she said simply. "That one was an inquisitor once. He came to purge us, but his soul was already ash. Now he burns for the light he claimed to serve." Malin's stomach turned. He wanted to walk away, but there was nowhere else to go. The wasteland offered no shelter, and the storm clouds above promised more than rain. They shimmered faintly with warp light. "If they're after me, they'll come for you too." "They already have," Elenia said, "and yet here we stand." The torches flared suddenly, their flames turning blue. The followers dropped to their knees, murmuring prayers. Alenia's eyes glowed faintly in the same hue. "You carry echoes of the choir," she said softly. "I can hear them. Their song is still alive in you." Malin stiffened. "How do you know that name?" "I've heard it in the storms," she said. "They sing of the dying god. They weep through the warp for a savior who doesn't exist." She reached out and placed her hand on his chest. "You could be that voice." He flinched back. "No, I'm no savior, I'm cursed." "All prophets are cursed," she said, turning away. "But curse and calling are two sides of the same coin." Before he could argue, the procession halted. The crowd began stacking debris into a wide circle, broken beams, shattered icons, and the twisted remains of old machine parts. Within minutes, they had built a pyre. Alenia mounted the mound and raised her staff. "Tonight," she declared, "we burn the illusion that binds mankind." The crowd roared approval. Some began to chant the Emperor's name, others curses against Terra. The confusion of faith and rebellion swirled together until it became a single feverish cry. Alenia gestured for Malin to step forward. "You saw the truth," she said. "Tell them what you saw." He looked out at the faces, desperate, scarred, and half-mad from life in the wastes. Their eyes glowed with fanatic light. He remembered the choir's last song, the faces burning away in radiance, the Emperor's dying beacon fed by the slaughter of minds like his. His voice trembled when he spoke. "I saw the throne," he said. "I saw a God who lives by feeding on the souls of his children. I saw the astronomic burning bright with their agony." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, others nodded as if he had confirmed their secret fears. "And I saw something else," he continued, the memory making his throat tight. "Something beyond him, watching, waiting. We are not his chosen, we are his fuel." Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Alenia lifted her staff high. "You hear him," she cried. "The Emperor's hunger consumes even his faithful. We will not be slaves to a corpse upon a throne." The crowd erupted. Some fell to their knees in tears, others screamed in joy or terror. Torches were hurled into the pyre. Flames burst forth, casting long shadows across the wasteland. Malin stepped back, heart hammering. This wasn't what he had meant. He had wanted them to understand the horror, not to celebrate it. But the fire took on a life of its own. The smoke twisted upward, forming shapes, faces, wings, eyes that blinked from within the plume. The warp was listening. Alenia turned to him, her expression almost serene. "The veil thins where truth is spoken. Can you feel it?" He did. The ground beneath him vibrated, the air humming like a living thing. The pyre's flames turned green, then violet. He could hear whispers again, not the choir's lament this time, but something darker, seductive. "Stop," he said. "You're tearing it open." She smiled. "Let it open. Let the false god see what he's created." The fire exploded outward, throwing them both to the ground. A vortex of light erupted from the pyre, spiraling upward into the clouds. Within it, something vast and winged moved, its form ever shifting, a being made of flame and thought. The followers fell prostrate, screaming prayers. Alenia rose, laughing. "Do you see, Malin? Even the warp answers our truth." He struggled to his feet, the psychic storm clawing at his mind. "That's not salvation," he shouted. "That's damnation." Her laughter echoed. "What's the difference?" Lightning tore through the sky. Warp energy cascaded down the vortex, striking the ground and sending shockwaves through the wasteland. Malin felt the pull, the familiar, agonizing drag of the warp trying to claim him. The voices grew deafening. "Join us, dreamer. Sing." He fell to his knees, clutching his head. For a moment he saw the choir again, their faces serene, their voices united. "Remember," they whispered, "you are not the flame. You are the voice that warns against it." He forced himself upright. Alenia stood at the heart of the storm now, her robes whipping around her, her body wreathed in unnatural light. She was no longer entirely human. The warp had claimed her devotion and made it flesh. Her eyes blazed white. "Malin," she said, her voice layered with other tones, "come stand beside me. Together we can reshape faith itself." He shook his head. "Faith doesn't need reshaping, it needs mercy." She raised her staff. The vortex shifted, focusing on him. Energy arced between them, burning his skin. His body convulsed, light spilling from his eyes. The warp recognized him, called to him, demanded his surrender. He took one step forward and then stopped. He remembered the faces in the choir, the woman in white, the sound of their final song. He drew on it, the resonance still buried in his soul, and screamed, not in pain but in defiance. The sound that erupted from him wasn't a word but a note, pure and terrible, a frequency that cracked stone and silenced the wind. The vortex stuttered. The warp faltered. Alenia screamed as her connection broke. The light around her turned violent, devouring her from within. "You don't understand," she cried. "You can't fight truth." "I'm not fighting truth," he said, his voice shaking with power not his own. "I'm fighting the thing that twists it." The energy surged again. The pyre collapsed inward, consuming her and the vortex with it. The fire turned white, then vanished, leaving only the echo of a scream that wasn't human. Malin fell, his strength gone. The ground around him was scorched to glass. The followers had scattered or burned. Those who remained stared at him in horror. "Witch," one whispered, "he killed her." Another spat, "Monster." He rose on trembling legs. "No," he said softly, "I saved her." They didn't listen. Fear outweighed faith. The first rock struck his shoulder. The second caught him in the ribs. He stumbled back as they began to shout, to chant, to gather weapons. The mob had turned. He ran again. Through smoke and ruin, across plains of ash, he fled until the screams faded behind him. The fires still burned, their smoke curling into the heavens where no god watched anymore. When night came again, or what passed for night, he collapsed beneath a wrecked crawler. His body ached, his thoughts flickering like dying lumen globes. He clutched the metal disc still fused to his palm. It was warm again. From somewhere far away he heard the faint echo of the choir's song, not mournful this time, resolute. And as his vision dimmed, he thought he heard another voice join it, softer, familiar. The woman in white. "You're not done yet, Malin," she whispered. "The pyre was only the first spark." He didn't know if it was real or just another dream. But when he looked at the horizon, he saw lights moving, not torches this time, but landing craft. The Ordo had followed the storm's beacon. They were coming. And this time he would not run. The first thing he noticed when he awoke was silence. Not the gentle, restful kind, but the suffocating hush of a place where every living thing had already screamed itself hoarse. The air was stale, charged with the residue of psychic discharge. When Alir pushed himself upright, his limbs felt carved from lead, his breath catching as his vision swam. Around him, the Psyker compound was nothing but ruin. The white stone arches that had once housed the choir were charred to skeletal outlines, their columns blackened and brittle. He blinked through the haze, feeling the weight of his own guilt pressing down harder than the dust-laden air. The ground was littered with corpses, men and women who had shared his torment, his secret dread, now stilled forever. But not all had died easily. Many had burned from within, faces twisted in eternal agony. His first thought was of Kale. That boy's laughter, the way his defiance had made even the darkest days bearable, haunted him now. He stumbled forward, tripping over debris, his heart thundering with a single prayer, let the boy be alive. Yet as he reached the shattered cells, that hope crumbled. Kale's body lay near the threshold, half buried in ash and splintered wood. The skin on his arms was cracked, blackened where energy had surged uncontrollably. His eyes, once fierce with mischief, were dull glass. Beside him, Alir saw the faint glimmer of the restraining circlet that had failed to contain the storm within. He fell to his knees, choking on grief that clawed its way up from the pit of his chest. There was no sound, no cry loud enough to match the hollow ache inside him. He had survived, but survival in the Imperium was never a mercy. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had become meaningless. He wandered the ruins, half-conscious, driven by instinct alone. Somewhere beyond the compound walls, he heard the distant roar of shuttle engines. Imperial Guard patrols, no doubt, coming to assess the damage. They would find him alive, and that was enough to seal his fate. A lone psyker amidst the ruins of a destroyed facility would be seen as the cause, not the victim. He had seen it before. The Emperor's servants would not ask questions, they would only cleanse. Alir looked around one final time and realized he had to flee. He stumbled through a breach in the wall, his steps uncertain, dragging his half-burned robe through the dust. Every sound, the flutter of ash, the creak of shifting metal, made him flinch. The wasteland stretched endlessly ahead, scorched under the blood-red light of a dying sun. For the first time in his life, Alir was free of psychic dampeners, free of the Inquisition's yoke. But freedom for a psyker was a curse worse than chains. Without suppression, the whispers returned, stronger than ever. He could feel them gathering at the edges of his mind, the entities from beyond, clawing at the thin barrier between realities. He pressed his hands to his temples and screamed until his voice broke. The wind carried his cries across the dunes like a lament for all souls damned by their own nature. He wandered for what felt like days, following the faint glimmer of lights in the horizon, a distant settlement, or perhaps another illusion conjured by his exhausted mind. By the time he reached the edge of a small frontier town, his strength had all but vanished. The locals froze when they saw him, ragged, bloodied, eyes burning faintly with unnatural light. No one spoke, no one dared to approach. In the Imperium, everyone knew what that light meant. He collapsed in the dust at the center of the square, hearing the murmurs ripple through the crowd like the hiss of serpents. "Which?" someone whispered. Another, bolder voice shouted for the Arbites. He didn't resist when they dragged him away. He had no more energy to fight, no desire to defend himself. When they locked him in a holding cell, he sank against the cold wall and waited for whatever judgment would come. But the judgment that came was not the one he expected. The Arbite's commander, a grim woman named Captain Solen, entered his cell hours later, flanked by 2 guards. Her face was pale and worn, the kind that had seen too many executions to still flinch at them. Yet when she looked at Alir, her expression was not hatred, it was curiosity. She studied him for a long moment before speaking, her voice low and deliberate. "You're from the choir facility," she said. "We heard the explosion from 10 clicks out. You're the only one who made it out alive." Alir nodded, too numb to answer. "You should be dead," she continued, almost to herself. "Most psykers who lose containment burn themselves out within minutes, and yet here you are." He lifted his eyes to meet hers. "Maybe that's my curse," he murmured. Something flickered in her gaze, pity perhaps, or recognition. She dismissed her guards with a nod. When they were alone, she leaned closer. "You have no idea how many times I've had to pull the trigger on your kind," she said quietly. "But I can tell when something isn't as simple as heresy. Tell me what happened." And so he did. He told her everything, the choir's torment, Kale's death, the moment the warp itself seemed to scream through their veins. When he finished, Solen was silent for a long time. Then she said, "They'll come for you soon. You know that, don't you?" Alir nodded again. "The black ships," he said softly, "they always come." She didn't deny it. Instead, she handed him a small object wrapped in cloth, a medallion bearing the insignia of the Astra Telepathica. "There are others like you," she said, "hidden, surviving. If you can get off-world, find the shrine on Voss Prime. Tell them Captain Solen sent you." He stared at the token as if it were a fragment of hope materialized in his palm. "Why help me?" he asked. Her answer was as weary as it was simple. "Because I had a brother once. He was like you. They took him when I was 12. I still hear his screams in my dreams." Then she turned and left, leaving the cell door unlocked. Alir didn't hesitate. He fled into the night, clutching the medallion. The town behind him erupted into chaos as alarms blared, but he was already gone. The world's darkness swallowed him whole. For days he traveled, hitching rides on freight convoys, hiding in the holds of ships bound for off-world transport. Every time he closed his eyes, the warp whispered to him, some voices pleading, others mocking, all of them hungry. His sanity frayed like thread under strain. When he finally reached the orbital docks, he was a ghost in all but name. The medallion got him through one checkpoint, then another, until he stood at the loading bay of a transport vessel headed for Voss Prime. As the ship's engines roared, Alir looked out the viewport. The planet below was shrinking, its surface burning faintly with the glow of the compound's ruin. He thought of Kale again, of the boy's defiant grin, his laughter echoing through sterile halls, and he whispered a promise to the void. "I'll make it mean something," he said, but deep down he knew the warp was listening, and when the warp listens, it never forgets. For 3 days the voyage was quiet, too quiet. He should have felt relief, but instead there was unease gnawing at him. The ship's crew avoided him as if sensing something foul. On the 4th day, during a shift change cycle, he awoke to alarms. The ship had drifted off course. Gellar field fluctuations pulsed across the hull. The crew screamed as shadows materialized in the corridors, whispers becoming forms, nightmares given flesh. Alir stumbled toward the control deck, trying to reach the emergency field stabilizer. But when he touched the console, the warp surged through him like a flood. He saw faces, countless faces of Psykers burned alive in the Emperor's name, all crying out to him, "Join us." The light engulfed the ship. When it cleared, the void was silent again. Only one lifeboat drifted among the wreckage, its beacon faint. Inside, Alir's body lay motionless, yet his eyes glowed faintly, and a whisper lingered in the static. They found the lifeboat drifting 3 weeks later near the edge of the Manville Point, tangled in debris and frozen corpses. The recovery team from the Mechanicus frigate Omnis Gracia assumed there were no survivors. They pried open the hatch expecting rot and silence, but instead found Alir, breathing, pulse faint, eyes wide open though he did not respond. They said his gaze followed them, though his pupils didn't move. When they touched him, the Auspex readings went haywire. Vox units screamed, static machine spirits whined in distress, and one of the crew collapsed mid-prayer, blood seeping from his ears. Still, the Magos ordered Alir brought aboard. Curiosity was a sin the Mechanicus never resisted. They sealed him in a stasis field and prayed to the Omnissiah that the Emperor's wrath would not notice what they carried in their hold. For days, the ship's crew whispered about the Psyker in the glass coffin. The data scribes refused to pass near his chamber, claiming the lights dimmed and voices murmured in binary hymns that no machine ever learned. Some said they saw flickers of figures walking beside his capsule, shadow forms shaped like those who had perished in the void. The Magos, whose name was Orseth, called it residual warp imprinting. But even he began to dream. In his sleep, he saw cathedrals of rusted steel bending under invisible storms, and in every dream the same whisper reached him, soft, pleading, undeniably human. "Don't let them take me back." When Alir awoke, it was in darkness. The glass was gone, replaced by metal walls and a faint red glow. He could feel the hum of the ship's engines deep beneath his skin, vibrating in time with his pulse. He sat up, disoriented, his mind flooded with fragments of the past, the choir's screams, Kale's laughter, Captain Solen's eyes. For a moment he thought he had died and been returned to torment. Then the door hissed open, and Magos Orseth entered, surrounded by flickering servo skulls. His mechanical voice rasped through a vocal modulator. "You have been unconscious for an indeterminate duration. The warp storm that consumed your vessel, it did not claim you. Curious." Alir's throat was dry. "Where am I?" he managed to whisper. "En route to Voss Prime," Orseth replied, "or what remains of it. The planet is currently under quarantine after psychic anomalies. You may be of use." His tone was devoid of empathy, yet there was something almost reverent in the way he regarded Alir, as if studying a relic that might either bless or damn him. "You survived total Gellar field collapse. That should not be possible." "I didn't survive," Alir murmured. "Something else did." The Magos' optics clicked in interest. "Explain." But Alir couldn't. How could he describe the voices he still heard, the countless minds that had screamed through him during the ship's fall? They were inside him now, fused into his soul, their pain an echo that never ceased. When he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of their deaths, burning flesh, void implosions, prayers to gods that never listened. He wasn't alone in his body anymore. He was Legion. Over the following days, Orsith performed test after test. Psi emitters, neural lances, containment sigils, none could fully measure Alir's power. The Magos began recording data logs in increasingly frantic tones. Subject exhibits nonlinear warp resonance, yet psychic signature remains coherent. Impossible. There is intelligence beyond him or within. At night, Alir felt the presence more clearly. Sometimes it whispered in Kale's voice, soft and frightened. Other times, it mocked him with the laughter of the dead. The boundaries between self and other blurred until Alir no longer knew where his mind ended. One evening the ship shuddered violently. Klaxons blared and the Vox filled with reports of power surges across the warp drives. Orsith stormed into the chamber, his robes flickering with static. "He's drawing power from the machine," he shouted to his adepts. But Alir wasn't conscious, his body levitated, veins glowing like molten metal beneath translucent skin. His mouth moved, though no sound came from it. Instead, the ship itself began to speak through the Vox, a voice overlapping hundreds of tones. "We are so many. We have seen the Emperor's fire. We have drowned in it." The adepts fell to their knees in terror. Orsith tried to shut down the power conduits, but sparks leapt from every console. In that moment, Alir's consciousness drifted into the warp fully. He saw the Omnis Gratia as a ghostly image adrift amid tides of color and shadow. He saw faces pressed against the hull from beyond reality, whispering for release. One, brighter than the rest, stepped forward, a figure wrapped in spectral flame, features half hidden but familiar. Kale. "You brought me with you," the boy said. "We're not supposed to be here." "I didn't mean to," Alir whispered, though his voice echoed across the Imperium like thunder. Kale smiled sadly. "None of us did." Behind him, millions of other shapes shimmered, the souls of dead Psykers, their agony bound to Alir's existence. "You can let us go," Kale said, "but if you do, they'll come for you." "Who?" "The ones who made you this way." Before Alir could respond, the vision fractured. He felt his body plummet back into the material world, slamming against the deck as alarms cut out. When his eyes opened, Orsith stood over him, awe and terror warring in his expression. "You stabilized the Gellar field," the Magos whispered. "You channeled it through yourself." Alir tried to stand, but his limbs trembled. "What does that mean?" "That you are no longer merely a Psyker," Orsith said. "You are a conduit, a bridge between realms. The Imperium would either sanctify or destroy you for this. Likely both." He paused, servo-arms twitching. "We will arrive at Vos Prime soon. There perhaps you will find purpose." But purpose was the one thing Alir no longer believed in. When the ship descended through the toxic clouds of Vos Prime, the sight that greeted them was apocalyptic. The planet's surface was fractured by vast rifts, where warp energy bled through like open wounds. Entire cities shimmered with ghostly reflections, each one slightly out of phase with reality. The Mechanicus outpost where they landed was little more than a bunker surrounded by sanctified pylons, their surfaces etched with runes of containment. Orsith led Alir through winding corridors until they reached the core sanctum. There, bound by chains of psychically null metal, was a woman. Her eyes burned like twin suns. "So," she said when she saw him, her voice both mocking and tender, "they've sent me another." "Who are you?" Alir asked. "I was like you," she said, "once, before I became the breach." The air around her shimmered, rippling like heat. "Vos Prime is dying because of me. Every day the warp bleeds a little deeper and the Inquisition calls it divine punishment. But I know the truth. The Emperor doesn't punish us, Psyker. He forgets us." Her words struck him like a blade. "Then why am I here?" "Because you're not forgotten," she said. "You're chosen." He wanted to deny it, but her gaze pierced through him. "Chosen for what?" To end it. She lifted her hands and the chains rattled, glowing with psychic energy. The room trembled as reality warped. For an instant, Alir saw beyond the veil, entire worlds burning, fleets devoured by unseen storms, the screaming faces of every psyker sacrificed on Terra's altars. "Do you understand now?" she asked. "The Imperium feeds on us. Every prayer, every sacrifice fuels the same machine that enslaves us. You can break it." "I can't," Alir said, voice cracking. "I'm just—" "You're the conduit," she interrupted. "You already reached through the warp and survived. You are the wound they cannot close." Orsith tried to intervene, chanting binaric litanies, but the air exploded with force. His servo-arm snapped backward, sparks erupting as he was flung aside. Alir felt the pressure building again, the same storm that had annihilated the choir, that had consumed the ship. The woman smiled through her tears. "Don't fight it this time," she whispered. "Let it be born." The light swallowed everything. When Alir opened his eyes, he was standing amid ruins again, but not of Voss Prime. He saw Terra, vast and blinding, the astronomican burning at its heart. He saw the endless lines of Psykers being led to their deaths, their souls fueling the Emperor's golden throne. He saw Kale among them, looking up at him not with hatred but sorrow. "It's all built on this," the boy said. "On us." And for the first time, Alir understood. The Emperor's light, the beacon that guided humanity, was also its curse. Every psyker sacrificed, every mind broken, every whisper silenced. This was the cost of survival. The vision began to fade. He reached out, desperate to hold onto it, but the world dissolved into fire. When the flames cleared, Voss Prime was gone. In its place drifted a sphere of glass-like ash, its surface calm and silent. The Mechanicus would later record it as a spontaneous reality collapse event. No survivors. But somewhere deep within the warp a voice lingered. Not screaming, not weeping, just speaking softly as if to itself. "I am the bridge, I am the wound, and through me they will all remember." The Administratum's archives recorded the destruction of Voss Prime as a data anomaly, a planetary implosion of unknown origin. No mention was made of Alir, or of the Mechanicus vessel that carried him. The files were sealed under inquisitorial authority, stamped with the sigil of the Ordo Hereticus. Those who attempted to review the records later found them missing entirely, as though the planet had never existed. But the void remembers what the Imperium forgets. In the deep between the folds of the warp, a new whisper began to circulate. It traveled not by ship or vox, but through the minds of those who dreamed in chains, the Psykers, the cursed, the condemned. They began to speak of a voice that came to them in their sleep, neither demon nor saint. A voice that promised something unthinkable: release. Alir did not know how much time had passed. The warp had no hours, no days. It was a place of endless becoming, where thought shaped reality and memory became weapon. He drifted through its tides, his body long since dissolved into energy, his consciousness spread thin across 1,000 streams of thought. The other voices were still with him: Kale's soft laughter, Solen's weary prayers, the cries of the countless who had burned for the Emperor. But they were no longer fragments of torment. They were a choir now, harmonizing through him, their pain transformed into something close to purpose. Alir felt the pulse of the astronomican, an unbearable brilliance radiating from the golden throne, and for the first time he saw its shadow. The beam that guided ships through the void was also a beacon of suffering, sustained by billions of extinguished souls, and the shadow it cast was vast enough to smother entire galaxies. He could not reach Terra, not yet. The warp currents that surrounded the throne were thick with psychic guardians, souls fused to their duty, forming barriers of living flame. But the voice within Alir called him to move closer. He drifted from world to world, unseen and unheard, passing through the dreams of those attuned to the warp. On Necromunda, a hive-born child woke screaming after seeing a man made of light standing beside her cot, whispering of mercy. On Cadia's ruins, a battle psyker went mad after hearing 1,000 voices chanting in harmony beneath the noise of artillery. and in the deep cathedrals of Mars, an old Magos began recording data he did not remember transcribing, schematics for a machine that could silence pain. The cult mechanicus called it heresy, but the adept whispered before his execution, "The bridge is coming." Each vision brought Elir closer to form again. He began to remember what it felt like to breathe, to feel the weight of matter around him. His return was not a birth but an eruption on the shrine world of Ephra, inside a sanctum where hundreds of Psykers were being prepared for sacrifice. The air shimmered, the lights flickered, and a figure stepped out of nothing. The priests fell to their knees, believing the emperor himself had descended. But when Elir raised his head, they saw his eyes, twin voids flickering with warpfire, and they recoiled in terror. The Psykers in their chains gasped as they felt his presence wash over them like a storm. For the first time in their lives, the whispers stopped. "Don't be afraid," Elir said. His voice carried not through sound but through thought, resonating within every skull. "You've already suffered enough." The high priest screamed orders for the guards to fire. Las bolts cut through the air, searing flesh and marble alike, but the shots dissolved inches from Elir's skin. The warp bent around him protectively, a ripple of defiance against the laws of physics. He turned his gaze to the priest, who trembled as blood seeped from his eyes. "Do you even know what you serve?" Elir asked quietly. "Every life you offer only deepens his hunger." The priest tried to pray, but his words faltered, swallowed by silence. Elir looked to the Psykers. "You can be free." With a motion of his hand, the chains disintegrated. The air filled with light as the released Psykers began to rise, their bodies glowing like embers caught in a storm. One by one they faded, their forms scattering into the immaterium, finally unbound, finally still. When the last of them was gone, Elir knelt amid the ashes. He wept not from guilt, not from triumph, but from the weight of knowing that even freedom came too late for most. Word of the event spread like wildfire through the ecclesiarchy, though none agreed on what had happened. Some claimed a demon prince had walked among men. Others called it a miracle, a test of faith. The Inquisition moved swiftly to silence witnesses, purging entire districts. But it was too late. The image of the man with the eyes of the void had already entered the prayers of the desperate. They began to call him the Shadow Saint, the one who wept for the damned. Elir moved on, drawn ever closer to Terra by something he could not name. The warp seemed to part for him now, its currents bending in recognition. He passed through the ghost light of forgotten ships, their crews long dead, yet still standing at their posts as echoes. They bowed as he passed, as if recognizing a fellow shade. The closer he came to the solar system, the heavier the air became. The astronomican's radiance was unbearable here, a constant roar of psychic fire that stripped thought from form. Still he pressed forward. At the edge of the Sol warp barrier he was met by a figure. Clad in armor black as midnight, wings of psychic flame spread from her back, Solène, or what remained of her. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice trembled between warmth and warning. "I have to be," Elir answered. "It started here, it ends here. You'll die if you try." "I already did." She reached for him, her hand glowing with golden light. "He's not what you think," she whispered. "The Emperor, he's not a monster. He's dying. He's been dying for 10,000 years." "I know," Elir said. "That's why it has to end." Her eyes filled with tears, or perhaps they were sparks from her burning form. "If you destroy the throne, humanity dies with it." "Maybe," he said softly, "or maybe it lives without chains for once." Solène hesitated, then lowered her hand. "Then go, but know this, when you reach him you won't find a god. You'll find a man who's forgotten his own name." Elir nodded, stepping past her into the blinding light. The throne world unfolded before him like a wound that refused to close. Terra was not a planet anymore, but a monument of suffering. Billions of souls hummed in unison, their pain sustaining the light that guided the Imperium's endless fleets. The warp here was so dense it felt like wading through blood. As Elir approached the golden palace, memories pressed against him. Every sacrifice, every scream, every whispered prayer for mercy that had ever been uttered in the Emperor's name. They flowed into him until he could barely stand. But through the agony, a single thought pierced: they must remember. The doors of the Sanctum Imperialis opened as if expecting him. Custodians stood guard, statues of gold and flesh intertwined, their weapons humming with lethal potential. They did not move. Perhaps they saw what he truly was, or perhaps they were blind to it. He walked through the vast halls where the air itself shimmered with divine radiation. At the end of a long corridor, upon the dais of the golden throne, sat the Emperor of mankind. Or what remained of him, a skeletal figure suspended in machinery, a god made by desperation. The psychic brilliance emanating from him was unbearable, yet Elir did not bow. "You are the wound," the Emperor's voice said, not aloud but within every atom of the chamber. "You made me," Elir replied. "You made all of us. And through you, humanity survives." "Survives?" Elir spat. "You feed them their own dead and call it salvation. You burn their minds to keep your light alive. How many souls fuel that fire now?" The Emperor's silence was vast, then softly, "As many as it takes." Elir felt rage rise like a tide, but beneath it was sorrow. "Then let me end it." "You would doom them all," the Emperor warned. "Without the light, the warp will devour every world." Elir stepped closer, his form flickering between matter and energy. "Then maybe it's time to let it. Maybe they'll build something better from the ashes." "You think yourself merciful," the Emperor said. "You are a storm that cannot see the ruin it leaves." "And you," Elir said, his voice trembling, "are the calm that kills everything it touches." The warp trembled. The chamber filled with ghostly figures, the Psykers who had perished, the souls that fueled the throne. They surrounded Elir, their light mingling with his own. For the first time the Emperor looked upon them not as fuel but as faces. Thousands of them, eyes full of quiet, terrible understanding. Kale stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "It's time," he said. Elir nodded. He reached out not to destroy but to release. The light flared brighter than a sun. The astronomicon flickered once, twice, and then went dark. Across the galaxy, ships lost their way. The warp howled. But for a heartbeat, silence reigned, a silence filled not with fear but peace. When the light returned, the golden throne was empty. The body upon it had vanished. The custodians found only a single feather of light, suspended in the air, and an echo of words they could not forget. "The Emperor is not gone, he remembers." And across the Imperium, the Psykers who once cried out in torment awoke to find the voices gone. The warp was quieter, not empty but merciful. Some called it a miracle, others the beginning of the end. None knew the truth, that somewhere beyond reality, Elir and the Emperor stood side by side, looking out upon the storm they had both made. "Was it worth it?" Elir asked. "I don't know," the Emperor said, "but it was necessary." And in that endless twilight between life and oblivion, two souls, one cursed, one divine, finally shared the same silence.